This is the Meze Poet, and if you want a headphone with great mids that makes human voices sound absolutely spectacular, stick around. Now, this is not your typical all-rounder trying to please everyone. It knows exactly what it is, and it does not apologize for it. But does that focus make this $2,000 headphone an expensive one-trick pony? Let's find out. Hey folks, I'm Norb, and this is my review of the Meze Poet. This was sent to me for review by Meze Audio, so huge thanks to them, but as always, all thoughts are my own, and they have zero input into what I say here. The Poet comes with a plastic case with foam inserts that is similar to the higher-end Meze Empyrean 2, but I do wish it had two latches instead of one, just for safety, maybe something on the sides. You also get a 2.5 meter copper cable with dual 3.5 millimeter connectors for the headphones and a 6.3 millimeter termination, which I found kind of odd. I don't see many headphones anymore that come with this 1/4 inch plug as the only option. You can of course add a 3.5 millimeter balanced cable, but that's extra. For my test, I use either a 6.3mm to 3.5mm adapter or the cable that came with my 105 Air, and of course, there is this pouch for the cable. Moving on to the headphone itself, it's a Meze. And if you know anything about Meze headphones, you know that that's a good thing. Solid construction, very comfortable, easy to repair, and of course, absolutely gorgeous. They've got these oval-shaped ear cups with an intricate steel grille pattern in copper finish, which I adore. The main body is made from magnesium, which keeps the weight down while staying strong. It also has these copper sliders on the side, which again accent the look and I absolutely adore. The headband itself uses a titanium alloy. That's aircraft grade stuff and it's incredibly durable, but it's very lightweight while adding just the right amount of clamping force. And finally, there's this wide suede headband. These come in at 410 grams or about 14.5 ounces, so they're light for high-end headphones, but definitely on the heavier side if you're coming from either Bluetooth headphones or something like the Meze 105 Air or 109 Pro. The ear pads use the standard magnetic system that Meze uses for their high-end headphones, which makes swapping them out super easy. Like with everything Meze does, there is no glue on these and every part can be replaced. Moving on to the drivers, and I'm about to get nerdy because this is cool stuff. The Poet uses planar magnetic drivers. Planar magnetic headphones have a reputation for being hard to drive. Meze headphones tend to be on the easier side to drive, with the Poet having an impedance of 55 ohms and a sensitivity of 101 decibels, which means that it's pretty efficient for planar magnetics, and in fact, while the Poet isn't quite as efficient as some of Meze's higher-end headphones, it does not take a lot to get really good sound out of it. I drove it just fine using my phone and the standard Apple 3.5mm to USB-C adapter. The US version, by the way, which delivers more power than the European version. For the Poet, Meze worked with Ukrainian company Rinaro Isodynamics, whom they've worked with on all their planar magnetic headphones, to develop and implement the Rinaro MZ6 driver. For this, Rinaro pulled together the MZ4, which they use for the Lyric 2, and the MZ3 SE, which they use for their top-of-the-line Empyrean Elite. Now, I've talked about this before in other reviews, but the human hearing spectrum goes from about 20 Hz to 20 kHz. These go from 4 Hz to 96 kHz, and they go that wide to make sure that you don't get any distortion due to frequencies. Plus, it ensures that the frequencies that you can hear all present well. They also have super low distortion at 0.05% across the entire frequency range. With the way Rinaro designed these drivers, they work by effectively cramming two separate drivers into one. What Meze and Rinaro did was implement two different coil systems in the same membrane, one to handle lower frequencies like bass and lower mids, and the other to focus on higher frequencies. That second coil is also aligned to the ear, which helps with clarity, detail, and representation. On top of that, Meze licensed a technology from Dan Clark Audio called the AMTS, or the Acoustic Metamaterial Tuning System. This helps by smoothing out some of the harsh upper treble, smoothing out voices, especially the upper harmonics, and maintaining detail while reducing fatigue. As for how well this succeeded, here's where things get really interesting. The overall character of the Poet is warm and generally smooth rather than clinical or analytical. It's rich, textured, and layered. If you're coming from something like gaming headphones or mainstream consumer cans, this will sound much more natural and relaxed. But if you're used to studio monitors or reference headphones, or something that's more focused on detail and clarity, you might find the Poet too focused on the mids at first, maybe even hollow at the highs and lows. In fact, that was my first impression. When I was first trying out the Poet, it didn't grab me. I could sort of see the audience this was going for, but I didn't necessarily feel that this was for me. In general, I tend to prefer headphones with a little extra bass and some clarity up top, but not too much. When I'm just listening to relax, or if I'm listening at work where I'm listening for hours, I prefer something fun but warm. neutral highs, and a boosted low mids and bass. It took me a little while to get used to the sound here, and it took me really testing it with a bunch of amps to really see what these could offer. That, by the way, is called psychoacoustic adaptation. Your brain getting used to how something sounds. Once I got used to these, man, did I love them. For my test at home, I mostly use the iFi GoLink Max, although I also use the DAC on my MacBook Pro and the Apple dongle, as well as the Chord Mojo 2. I actually preferred the GoLink Max, but at CanJam, I got to test these with a few others, and I think my favorite was the iFi Valkyrie. I also really liked it with the Asterlink Kern SP3000. The staging, that's how wide and spacious the sound feels, is moderate for an open back, but where the Poet really shines is in how it positions voices. Singers appear in front of the mix, so they sound like they're in front of all the instruments. This gives them incredible clarity and presence, more so than any other part of the performance. Through this, the Poet presents a lush sound, so that the overall presentation sounds more full, almost organic. At the same time, there's an airy yet relaxed quality to the music. That's an environment that's going to be fantastic for some types of music and not great for others, depending of course on personal preference. And for that, I think we need to look at each region of the sound. Starting with the low end. The Poet gives you a good punch and impact in the upper bass region. That's roughly 80 to 200 Hz. This whole area is somewhat elevated, which will not only give you a good slam, but also it's what gives that lushness to the sound. It also means that the drums hit with an authority and bass guitars have a presence in the mix. But there's a trade-off here. There's a definite pullback in the deeper bass, especially if you're coming from a closed back or just something that is just more in line with the Harman preference curve. That means that if you love tracks that make the headphones vibrate, if you like to feel your bass, the Poet will not really give you that, at least not with its default tuning. Instead, it'll give you a smooth bass that will be there, but will always support the rest of the music rather than being the main show. So this isn't bad, it's not a weakness, but it does mean that certain genres and certain pieces won't hit with the impact that you might want out of them, especially if you want something that's more exciting. Moving on to the mids, this is where the Poet absolutely shines, and should, since this region is slightly elevated, from about 100 Hz to 1.5 kHz. Instruments here sound present, but not overpowering. Acoustic instruments like guitars and pianos will also benefit from this focus, sounding warm and inviting, but the tuning on the Poet really is geared far more towards human voices. Here the Poet is so smooth that, so I listen to music while I work. But a lot of the time, I'm listening to lo-fi because I can't listen to voices while I work. As soon as I hear a voice, that's where my focus goes. It just ends. But not with the Poet. In fact, the Poet is the only headphone I've used where I can listen to vocal music and still focus on my work. There's just something about how the Poet presents vocals that makes them feel calming rather than distracting. And let me tell you, that is an accomplishment. Male voices sound incredibly natural with proper weight and texture. Female voices are smooth and well presented, although I did experience some issues with upper harmonics, which brings us, of course, to the treble. The high frequencies are mostly well behaved, smooth and non-fatiguing throughout most of the range. But there's a spike way up high, above 10 kHz, that can cause issues at times. At least it did with me until I got used to it. However, that spike is also what creates that sense of detail and airiness, so whether you like it or not is really going to depend on you. For male vocals, this is usually not a problem. For female vocals, it can introduce an uncomfortable edge or sharpness, especially on sustained high notes. The good news is that this responds really well to EQ if you know how to use it. A gentle roll-off in the highest frequencies solves this problem while keeping everything else intact. With all that said, here's how this impacted my experience with music. For folk, indie, and genres in that general vein, the Poet is stunning. If you listen to artists like Passenger, Phoebe Bridgers, The Decemberists, Abby Kaplan, or pretty much anything labeled 70s soft rock, these are the headphones for you. I especially love Let Her Go, the collaboration between Passenger and Ed Sheeran. This was just so good. The album As It Ever Was, So It Will Be Again by The Decemberists was also fantastic. I'll extend this to musicals too. Pure Imagination from the movie Wonka or Impossible Dream from Man of La Mancha both shine on the Poet. Modern pop production works beautifully with the Poet's strengths, with a different focus that I'm generally used to. The controlled bass prevents a ton of bloat and muddiness, while the vocal focus ensures that the singers cut through even the densest electronic arrangements. But it isn't what I'd call a lively headphone. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's relaxed, soulful even. Some direct examples from the same recording. Golden from the movie K-pop Demon Hunters is excellent on the Poet. Driving, smooth, thumping. On the other hand, Your Idol from the same movie really needs that full bass extension, so I found myself missing that here. Rock music works surprisingly well, especially if you like vocal-driven rock. The emphasis on mids means singers remain clear and intelligible even through heavy instrumental sections. Songs like I Write Sins, Not Tragedies showcase this perfectly. All the theatrical vocals coming through with clarity and engagement. That said, if you're really into bass-heavy rock or metal that relies on aggressive treble energy, you might find the Poet a bit tame. Vocal jazz gets exceptional treatment. Singers appear with remarkable presence and a natural timbre, and the intimate staging works perfectly for small ensemble recordings. A really good choice for this headphone is definitely the Tony Bennett-Lady Gaga collaborations. Those just highlights the best of the Poet. Now, if you're into classical, like I am, this is where the Poet's limitations became apparent. Large orchestral work need full bass extension and sparkling highs to sound their best, and the Poet doesn't really deliver there. Violin solos can sound veiled, and the overall presentation just lacks this grandeur that classical music deserves. Chamber music and solo piano work better, but you'd still be better served by a more neutral headphone for classical listening. As for electronic genres, these were hit or miss. For example, lo-fi. These achieve smoothness that you want out of lo-fi, and they're definitely relaxing. But if you're looking for that bass or deep rumble, you're not going to get them from here. In fact, I think that goes across the board for most electronic music. Unless you want that focus on voices, I'm not sure that I love the Poet for these. All that said, the Meze Poet is one that I found fascinating. This is a headphone that is unapologetic about what it expresses. Just like any good Poet, it's got a very definite identity. If vocal music makes up the majority of your listening, or if you just love full mids, the Poet might just change how you experience your favorite songs. If you're on the fence, then this is one I'd recommend you take a few days to audition if you can, if for no other reason than to get used to what it offers and then decide based on what equipment you have on hand and based on your preferences and what you listen to. Now, if you're looking at spending $2,000 and you're considering these, you may also want to consider other options. I'm going to keep my recommendations within the Meze line though, because it's a company whose products I know well and I really like. First off, if you want something that's more popular music focused, think pop, hip hop, electronic, hard rock, I'd argue the Meze Lyric 2 is probably a better choice, and it comes in at the same price. It's one that I reviewed about a year ago now, and it's basically the closed back partner to the Poet. They complement each other fairly well because they also sound very different, especially in the bass because of its closed back nature. It comes in at the same price and it has a similar body. They can even share ear pads. Both have that Meze house sound, so they're still going to be relaxing and smooth. If you're just looking for a single pair to do it all, I'd recommend saving up and going with the Empyrean 2 instead. That one comes in at $3,000 in the US, but I think it's well worth it. From a tuning standpoint, you have something that sounds both brighter and more open while getting similar voice performance and more bass extension. In fact, it's why I ended up buying it myself. Alright, I hope you found this useful, and if you want to share your thoughts or have any questions, hit me up in the comments below. That said, please remember to like and subscribe if you want to see more like this, and check out these videos if you want to see more Meze reviews, especially this one right here, which is of course the Empyrean 2 that I was just talking about, plus, one of my other favorites. Take care.